Tēnā koutou katoa, nā mai haere mai. Welcome back to the Power Podcast. I am delighted today to be joined by the fabulous Kate Billing. I love talking to Kate Billing at any opportunity I can get. So this is a great opportunity to have for me, and I'm pretty stoked that you can all listen in too. So Kate Billing, for those that do not know her, is a human-obsessed leadership pragmatist. She's got 25 plus years in the people, culture, and leadership space. She's the Executive Development Director of Blacksmith, also the founder of katebilling.com, and New Zealand's leading voice on human-centered leadership and the intersection of gender, age, and equity in our workplaces. Inspired by her personal experience of navigating the midlife turning point and supporting senior women leaders to do the same through her executive development work, Kate has added midlife activist to her description. Hey, it is fabulous to have you here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. A delight as always, Jess.
So here on the podcast, we've been talking a lot about the issues that women leaders face. And I think what particularly inspires me, well, there's lots that inspires me about your work, to be fair, but what particularly inspires me of late is this transition piece. So we go through many different phases, I feel, in our careers, obviously, but also our lives. And I've always marveled at other cultures. I know when I spent time with Buddhists and the very kind of Eastern culture, there's this piece around aging, which I feel we can learn so much from, where it's revered, it's admired, it's respected. There's almost this wisdom that comes with age. And of course, that's prevalent in a lot of our Indigenous cultures as well, that elders are respected and have so much to offer. And yet I feel sometimes in our workplaces in particular, but also in our society, there's this feeling that sometimes we become less than with age as opposed to more than in terms of what we've got to offer. And I'd love to start there because I know this is your subject matter of expertise. So yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, right? This idea of being in transition and always evolving. It's one of my personal kind of guiding principles is always be improving and always be evolving, always be open, to what might come next. A thing that came to me in my journaling a number of years ago, be about 17 years ago now, that has guided my life and my work since it appeared on paper, was don't let who you're being get in the way of who you could become. So I think there are definitely, there's a lot in what you just sort of had in the setup to that question about social expectations, societal norms, stereotypes, etc. There's also a lot about the judgment of self and this need to conform to norms to fit in, which is deeply wired at a human level. So it's natural that we want to live in for some of these things and resist living into other things. Just recognizing the fact that we're changing, because for long periods of our adult life we don't actually change that much, even when we look in the mirror, right? So I think this thing in our kind of more developed / Western, whatever label you want to put on it, cultures, is in large part a product of the industrial age, which has just become more and more bedded in, right? If we think back to even when the concept of retirement was first mooted in the 1880s in Germany, it was the first place that it was put in as a legislative thing, like there's a legal requirement to retire at 70. At the time, the average life expectancy was 48. So, 70, and that was all about getting people this judgment of the value of life by measured in productivity and your ability to contribute to the efficiency of the machine, the economic machine. And, if we take our attention forward from there, that's 144 years ago. Right, through that time, you think about all of the things that have changed about the way we create value in the world, the roles, respectively, of men and women and how they have and have not changed, including the changes that were wrought through 2 world wars and what that
Mm,
did for moving women from the home out into the workforce in a different way. And out of, for the longest time, human beings had basically, you were born into a family and you grew into whatever the family did to create value for society, whether it was farming or it was making barrels or it was being a blacksmith or it was being in service and, to people in the upper echelons. There was, most people, life was pretty hard and set, kind of, you didn't get out of your station and out of role. And that, so much of that's changed in the last 150 years and so rapidly. And with that, we've also had not only the ways of working has changed, but the way society organizes itself, the roles of women, the expectations of women. We've been controlled, should we put it that
mm,
way, in,
yeah.
in new and different ways through the last century, I think in particular. And, now we have a generation of women, I think largely in the Gen X space, who are looking at some of these socially normed stereotypes. We've been banging on about various things our entire time in the workforce. But now we come into midlife and this big transition, coming back to your transition thing, it's big transition of perimenopause and menopause, which is not just about fertility. So much of women's value in society is about youth, beauty, and fertility. And if you're
Yeah.
no longer young, and beautiful is always seen as looking young and looking fertile, fecund, if you're no longer those things, it's amazing how deeply wired that shit is and how we turn our minds against ourselves in this time, as well as finding society and the media and workplaces turning their backs on us. So it's a profound
Mm,
transition. I think, yes, there are many, but for a lot of women, this is the biggie. And particularly
yeah.
if you haven't gone through pregnancy and motherhood, which an increasing number of women don't,
Yeah.
this puppy comes upon you like a steam train.
Mm, yeah. Oh, there's so much in that, Kate. Um, you're so right that so much of our societal constructs, if you like, or what we founded our workplace organization culture around has been these outdated models and these outdated norms, I guess, that we then are in a position where we have to conform to or feel as though we have to conform to. And I think for me, the irony of this is that for many of the women that you and I work with, they're coming into, it's almost like your peak. So the peak of your career around this time, often the peak of your life in terms of, all the shit you've had to go through to get to that point, the challenges you've overcome, the things you've learned, the things you can offer the world. All of this is happening at exactly the same time. The world and the workplace then kind of tries to turn its back on us. And I reckon there is such a big thing in this around the external world around us. Because women are judged differently, right? When we age, it is perceived differently in the media and differently by others than if we were a male aging in the same way. And that's then viewed differently in terms of what we contribute in the workplace. And then you add to that all these mystical things that we've never really talked about in the workplace, like menopause and the like, that people, particularly if they're not women who've been through menopause, want to kind of steer away from because they're terrified or don't understand. And so there's this combination, I think, almost like this perfect storm of all this coming together, the outdated norms, the fact that it's different from a gender perspective. And then, of course, you overlay that with there's not just the external world that's impacting us in this space, but then our internal world as well and our own thoughts around this stuff too. And it's a perfect storm.
Yeah. And I think, further to the your comment about peak, right? This is something that we talk about. That life gets better. The story that we're all sold is that, particularly Gen Xers, and I speak for myself and all of the majority of the women I speak to, and this includes, for those listening, what I call Zoomers and Millennials, which is the shoulder years of either generation of people who, and it's not all about generations, but it is partly about generations, right? We came into the world in certain economic, cultural, social, family, technology contexts, and those things are different for different generations in lots of ways. So, I think Gen X we're getting to this place. We've been told, work hard and the rewards will come. We've, as women, worked in the workplace. We've benefited off the back of some of the boomer women who did amazing jobs in trying to break through glass ceilings and take their place at the table and all the rest of it against huge odds. We still be fighting some of those same battles. A lot of it still feels like window dressing, or there's not enough women. And in many organizations now, women in leadership stats are going backwards, and it's happening globally. So, we're not done. This is no time to rest on our laurels. But you've got the work hard, the rewards will come. We've done everything we were told to do, including be good homemakers and perfect mums and great leaders and career women. And now we're in this time of life and everyone's completely knackered to get to this point and go, so this is the peak? It's like, what the,
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it doesn't feel like the peak, because it isn't in lots of ways. Like, we have an expectation that life gets better and better and better. And then in midlife, it's the best it's ever going to get. You're at your peak, and then it's all downhill from here, right? When actually, quite the reverse is true. Things get harder. And when you start talking to people about their experience, particularly in their 40s and into their early 50s, it's like, man, it feels like the weight of the world, that they can't carry things anymore, right? But it does get better. So the reality is actually more of a U-bend than it is a peak. And that dissonance between what we expect it to feel like, having worked so hard and achieved all the things and got the stuff, etc., versus where we actually feel we are, and the pressures we're under and the way we've sacrificed ourselves, is huge. That gap is huge, and that makes the weight of it feel all the more. And the story we've got is, well, it can't possibly be going to get better. But actually, that's not the truth, right? And so this, the current generation of women, I think, are going, there's been 20 years of radio silence and an entire generation of boomer women who have been done a huge disservice by the medical profession around menopause, and completely unsupported in all areas of their lives. And my heart breaks about that. And then got Gen X arriving into it going, wait a cotton picking second. Why haven't we heard about this? And we want it to be better for us and for other people. And I think the conversation about menopause is part of the transition, particularly in the workplace. I know there's a lot of eye rolling in some quarters now, like, can we stop talking about it? I think, no.
We've only just started.
We've just started.
We haven't talked about it.
No, because it's when there are so many impact points for that experience, not just for women, but for organizations, in terms of keeping women in their employment and in the workforce generally, and for society, about having women at the stage of life being powerful, productive members of our economy and our families and our communities. So being supported through, I know I hear people say, oh, but it's a natural transition. It's like, yep, there's all sorts of shit that's natural, and cancer's natural. But we still support people.
Yeah.
Right, we provide them with treatment options and leave and all the rest of it. Right, but this is not cancer, it's not a sickness, it's something everyone goes through. And it is taking women out of the workforce in huge numbers.
Yeah.
So
and arguably
it's an important
at a time where they can most contribute to that workforce as well, in terms of all of the wisdom and experience they bring into that moment.
Yeah, well, I know Dr. Linda Deer at the beginning of last year, 2023, did a big survey across New Zealand, biggest survey, 4,500 women and non-binary people who also experience perimenopause and menopause contributed to it. And what the respondents across New Zealand said, 1 in 12 had left their job.
Wow.
because of symptoms. That's 8%. That's slightly under Australia, the US, Canada, and the UK, where it's 10%. And that's just of people who know that that's why they left.
Yeah.
Versus they think they've got dementia, or that they're losing their edge, or that they're not resilient anymore, or they're in so much pain, they can't sleep, they can't function for a period of time, particularly if they're not getting support and treatment, right? So we're losing, at the moment in New Zealand, there are about 500,000 women who are in this midlife 45, 55 perimenopause, menopause bracket. Of course, younger women, you know, you can get perimenopause symptoms in your 30s. So but there are 500,000 women in the workforce, which is huge. It's like 98% participation for people of that age group in New Zealand. And of those, I'm trying to remember exactly how many it was now. I'm losing my numbers, but it'll be a white paper perimenopause moment, people. Welcome to my world. But with that was it, yeah, the 8% of those, that's 40,000 women leaving the New Zealand workforce each year because of their unsupported perimenopause, menopause symptoms, leaving their jobs every year. And so I don't know many organisations that can afford to lose great people. And a number of those people are coming out of leadership roles. And we see this reflected in some of the data from Australia where they report this, where women in leadership roles peak in their late 40s to early 50s, and then it declines in terms of women in leadership, whereas men keeps climbing. So the delta between the number of men and women in senior leadership roles past the age of 52 grows more significant. McKinsey have talked about this. Senior women leaving, they're calling it the great breakup. Senior women leaving roles twice as fast as they're coming into them. You know, menopause is not the only thing. There's a whole lot going on. But the stories we have, the system that supports or not, you know, to help women stay in and be temporarily accommodated if they need to, so that they can keep contributing, is super important. We have much work to do.
Yeah, I'm just listening to those stats, Kate. I mean, if this was something like a problem with the building we were working in or the machinery we were using, and it was contributing to that many talented individuals leaving the organization, we would fix it. We would, you know, immediately we would be investing in that, eh? And I guess we're only just talking about this now in our workplaces, so we're a little bit behind in that space. And I feel like, you know, you talked about the word contribution, and I feel like what's your thoughts? Because I know we both share a passion in this space around, I know the work that you do with your tune-in sessions. We share a passion in this space around self-talk. And I know that for women, this is massive and often stop us contributing in this space. And then, of course, you overlay that with the external factors of societal norms, the outdated models, the world we live in, the gender differences, and then things like menopause, which is internal and external in terms of how it's perceived and how it impacts us. What's your thoughts on how we maintain our contribution and I guess stand in our power as we go through these major transitions, particularly from that place of the stuff that we can control? Because a lot of that external environment, whilst we are navigating our way through it and things are shifting over the past few years, there's a way to go, but we've kind of made, you know, small progress. If you look at over the last 100 years, small progress, still a way to go. But what about the stuff we control in terms of what goes on in our own head and that self-talk and how we make sure we're not taking our own power away, despite the stuff that's going on around us and the treacle that we're having to wade through?
Yeah, 100%. I talk about, so in all of the work I do, I talk about this concept that there are three contributors that we can look at in terms of thinking about how this plays. So there's the sense of personal power that you're talking about, which I think is really important. Sometimes when we have this word power, there's a gendered association of it being this masculine strength, power over others, ego-based kind of thing, right? And that's not what we're talking about. This is about agency, you know, autonomy, a feeling of well, I think this is, let's talk about this a bit further. So the three things: the sense of personal power, state of mind, and level of energy. You know, if we look at some of those three things and how those dynamics are kind of changing for us at any particular time, at one end of the continuum around those three things, we have this powerlessness that you're talking about, this sense of being at the effect of everything, right? Even our own minds, our own minds, right? So there's a real, and that can be a place of that from a state of mind perspective can feel quite chaotic. You know, it's fritzy, it's ungrounded. You just kind of don't know which way's up. There's a real feeling of being unanchored, and it's an exhausting place from that energy level, you know, perspective. It's an exhausting place to be. And often when we're in these transitional times, there's this thing called liminal space where we're not what we were, things are not what they were, but they're not what they will be, etc. And this feeling of powerlessness, exhaustion, and chaos is part of that. And it's really easy to slip into a victim mindset. And when we notice that in our thoughts and in our, you know, we're present to what we think, what we say, how we behave. When we're in that space, we have to catch ourselves. We really do. And from a place of non-judgmental curiosity, take a little look, you know, and this is self-leadership. So there's a bit of self-care and sort of saying, I get that this is how I feel that things are. And my brain is telling me that this is shit and it'll never get better and I've got to get away from it, all the rest of it. But actually, I just need to test whether what my brain is telling me is actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much am I operating at the effect of entrained habitual thought and behavior patterns, at the effect of other people's real or imagined expectations of me, at the effect of a system I can't control or do anything about, you know, at the effect of. So there are some things that we are at the effect of, some of which we have control over. And this is where this agency and autonomy thing is important, because we haven't given our power to anybody. We've just forgotten that we've got it.
Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
we've temporarily forgotten. And what getting into some of these reflective practices, mindful practices, making sure that we have personal life practices that mean we're creating spaces for these conversations, that we are making sure we're building the capacities. So again, this kind of level of energy for it, but also the skills to, and there's no substitute for meeting yourself on paper. Anyone who works with me knows that that's table stakes. Just having a talk to yourself in your head is not enough. That's all conscious mind, ego, trying to control the thing. We have to just calm and create the space. When we do that, we can move kind of up the continuum a bit, and so move from that chaotic feeling in the mind to a state of calmness. And it's amazing how quickly that can come. That can come in a few minutes. You know, from exhausted, you know, from that place, we can move from this exhausted space into feeling just a bit more equalized. I think too often there's this conversation about how to go from exhausted to energized. And it's like, that is not one step.
Yeah.
It's not one step. We have to like circle the wagons and make some time and space for ourselves, create a space of calmness so that the brain can do what it needs to do and talk properly to itself. All the bits can talk properly rather than be in a stress threat response. Get into this kind of just more equalized, you know, we talk about equanimity, etc., just this equalized middle ground.
Yeah.
And because then that gives us the opportunity to feel empowered. So again, it's not powerless to powerful. It's this just, and empowerment isn't the way, I don't mean that the way a lot of people use, like delegate stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like, I'm empowering you. I'm giving you my shit tasks to do. It's like, no, that's not empowerment. You know, it literally means giving some of your power to someone else so that they can act on your behalf. And this is really about taking, as I say, it's just remembering that we have it at our disposal. So there are always life is just tricky, always, right?
Yeah.
If we think there's some nirvanic state that we're going to reach and everything's going to be great and every day's going to be amazing,
When it's
you're
all
living,
over.
it's cloud cuckoo land. I don't know if you've seen Dr. Stutz, heard about Dr. Phil Stutz,
No.
American psychiatrist, amazing. And he talks about life there being three things we can be certain of in life, and that is pain, uncertainty, and constant work.
Paints a beautiful picture.
I know it's a bit of a depressing picture at first when you hear it. You're like, oh, crikey, really? But I think the fact that if you make peace with the fact that that's all true, and that in amongst that there can be beauty and joy and love and meaning and purpose, and that the paradox is that all of those things can be true at the same time. I think this is why I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. We have to embrace the fact that life is hard in lots of ways. It is full of pain, but it is also full of joy and growth and love and possibility. And when you can hold both of those realities in your mind at the same time, this powerlessness, victim, self-talk, etc., can more easily be put aside.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And I think you can't have one without the other, right? You have to have, if you want the good, the bad comes too. And luckily, you don't just always get the bad because there is always good in it too. And it reminds me of a lot of the Buddhist philosophy around change and impermanence. Everything, whether life is really good at the moment for you, great, enjoy it because it's going to change, or life is really bad for you at the moment. Don't worry about it because it's going to change. It's going to come good. So there's always this good and bad, and all of those things kind of come together to make part of our life. And I'm kind of playing at the moment with this concept of I've called it harmony, because I feel like it's that middle ground that you were talking about, that equanimity, where it's not just about the sense of calm that comes about us. It's this connectedness with something bigger, like that purpose, piece, and meaning, that brings about a harmony in our life, that all is well, even when it's not great. So that whole concept of, yeah, this is life and I'm enough and I'm getting through it, even when there's challenges, because there always is for all of us. And if there isn't right now, then there probably is around the corner, because that's how life works. And I think that when we're in that space, we're in such a better position to then be able to contribute, to be able to bring our best, to kind of weather, I guess, the storms. And I loved what going back to the very start of our corridor, I love you said, don't let who you're being get in the way of who you can become. And I love that, because I think that's this real, for me, that sums up this evolution, this transition, this constant improvement, I guess, of ourselves, whilst knowing, everything we bring to that moment is already enough. And I think this speaks to that feminine power that we're talking about. This, it isn't that ego power over dominance. It's often more subtle, and it comes from this deep self-awareness. And I think you did a beautiful job of describing that. What are you up to at the moment, Kate? And where can people find you? Where can we find out more about Kate Billing, and what are you up to? How can we get involved in hearing more?
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I mean, so for 15 years, I have been one of the co-founders and the executive director at Blacksmith. So that's where if people have heard of me, that might be the association, right? So doing human-centered development, and my work is with intact executive teams. So that's been the adventure of the past 15 years. We've this year we just are kicking off a new adventure that sits alongside that, which is under my name, katebilling.com. Nice. I always feel like I need to say that in an American accent, katebilling.com.
You need a voiceover.
Need a voiceover. My husband insists that figurines are sold separately, so which I always love. And this work, the work I feel called to do, and I think in the intro you mentioned this midlife activist thing, the work I'm feeling called to do is about what I call midlife and second life. I think a lot of when I think about life, I think about it in three parts. First life, which is all about acquisition and achievement and growth and learning. And, there's a very well laid out map for us to follow. And then we get to this midlife space and go, oh shit, I've wound up where I was headed, even if I didn't intend to. Where am I? Who am I? Sense of mortality, etc. So there's this midlife, and then the midlife is a transition space that offers us a pathway into what I call second life, because it really is a whole new game. It's not just another level of the first life. Like there's a whole new set of rules. So the new practice is under katebilling.com is about midlife leadership and how we navigate the midlife turning point, a bunch of things we've been talking about. It is about addressing ageism, and in particular gendered ageism in our workplaces, and looking at age inclusive cultures and myth busting some stuff about the aging workforce. And that's going to come into being through events, workshops, and a community. So if people are looking to get involved, you can go to the website. We have an event called the Gen X Factor about the midlife leadership opportunity for a new generation of women. That's coming up in September. We have our community, Pathmaker community, launching in August, so people can get on the wait list. And if you want to handle your self-talk, there is an Auckland 2-day workshop happening in November, and all of the information's up on the website. I'd love you to come and play.
Nice. So katebilling.com, with or without the American accent, is where you will find out more.
It's all the same when you type it into a browser.
This is true. Kate, look, you are a shining example of living this stuff, and using your personal power and taking your skills and your experience to where you're being called to make an impact, and it is already making a significant impact. So keep doing that. Thank you for sharing it with us. It has been a privilege to chat and have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Jess. All the best with your continued good work as well.
Thank you.